Welcome to everyone present over here. Continuing with the disease club activities, let's today discuss about the clinical presentation, diagnosis and management of congestive heart failure. Myself Ravichandra CV, 6th PharmD, ABM RCP. Since it's a previously recorded presentation, there might be variations in the tone and volume of voice heard and also some background disturbances. Please ignore if you notice it. Thank you. Talking about the clinical presentation of heart failure, there is left-sided heart failure in which the signs include pulmonary rales, nothing but crackling sounds heard on oscillation, pleural effusion, mostly or typically bilateral, largely displaced apical impacts where the lateral and downward movement of apex beat can be identified as an evidence of cardiac enlargement, narrow pulse pressure, tachycardia, mitral regurgitation or systolic murmurs. Symptoms of left heart failure includes dyspnea or shortness of breath, particularly on exertion and even on rest. Orthopnea happens mostly with the supine position. Paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, which is the dyspnea associated with cough during nighttime. Fatigueness, exercise intolerance or inability to perform or withstand physical activities. Right-sided heart failure, the signs consist of edema of lower extremities, elevated jugular venous pressure, hepatojugular pressure, hearing additional heart sounds S3 and S4, tricuspid regurgitation or pansystolic heart murmurs, hepatomegaly, right upper quadrant tenderness, ascites and pleural effusion unilaterally. Symptoms of right-sided heart failure includes swelling of feet and hands, which would be affecting the lungs, ankles and abdomen, causing feeling of suffocation and drowsiness, abdominal distension or fullness, right upper quadrant pain, feeling of very little intake of food or early satiety, cardiac cachexia or body wasting found in the long-lasting heart failure conditions. Diagnosis of heart failure, it can be non-specific, specific radiological and cardiac testing. Non-specific mainly involves in determining the complete blood count, investigating the possibilities of anemia and blood oxygen and carbon dioxide analysis, which assess the respiratory gas exchange and determine reduced oxygen carrying capacity. Serum electrolytes, sodium, potassium, urea and creatinine levels to assess the renal functioning. Blood glucose and HbA1c to determine the possibilities of diabetes mellitus. Thyroid function test to investigate if there is any possibilities of thyrotoxicosis. And lastly, lipid profile test to evaluate the serum cholesterol levels. Coming to the specific test for diagnosis of heart failure, it's BNP or brain natriuretic peptide levels. So increase in the hormone of BNP levels indicates heart failure, and with a measure of more than 100 picogram per ml, it determines to be an heart failure condition. Coming to the radiological examination, it's chest radiograph or X-ray, which helps in detection of cardiac hypertrophy, consolidation of lungs or pulmonary edema and pleural effusion. And coming to the cardiac testing, it's ECG or EKG, which is nothing but electrocardiogram. So these tests determine the functioning of heart and also electric activity. It also helps to assess the left ventricular size, valve function, pericardial effusion and mainly ejection fraction. Next is echocardiography, which mainly provides the information about size, shape of the heart and functioning of valves and chambers. Doppler ultrasound, which measures the speed and direction of blood flow. Coronary angiography, nuclear heart and cardiac MRI scan, it aids in determining the blood flow to the heart and amount of blood reaching the heart muscles. And the last one is exercise and stress tolerance test. Management of congestive heart failure. Before we go into the actual management of congestive heart failure, we need to know about the guidelines provided by two heart associations. One is New York Heart Association and American College of Cardiology Foundation and American Heart Association. So these guidelines classifies the heart failure into different stages, providing an insight for diagnosing and evaluating the extent of progression of heart failure. New York Heart Association NYHA, it classifies heart failure into class 1 to class 4 on the basis of symptom severity and amount of exertion needed to provoke symptoms based on the physical activities. According to ACC or AHA, it classifies heart failure into stage A to stage D, which mainly describes about the structural heart disease, presence or absence of symptoms, and risk of developing the condition. The pharmacological therapy for heart failure, we have diuretics. Diuretics are the class of drugs with the following mechanisms. So these drugs increase the urinary and water excretion, thereby reducing the blood and plasma volumes. It reduces preload, which helps in improving the pulmonary and systemic venous congestion. It also helps in reducing the afterload and ventricular volume, so that thereby there will be fall in the ventricular wall tension and increase in the cardiac efficiency. It also helps in relieving pulmonary and peripheral edema. There are three main classes of diuretics used in the treatment of heart failure. One is loop diuretics, mainly furosemide, torsemide and bumetanide, and etacranic acid belongs to this class. Next, thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics, which includes metazolone, chlorthalidone, hydrochlorothiazide and chlorothiazide. Lastly, aldosterone antagonist, which includes spironolactone and eplerenone. Thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics. So these class of drugs act upon the early portion of DCT, inhibiting the reabsorption of sodium and potassium ions, which is excreted finally as urine. It also stimulates reabsorption of calcium from the glomerular filtrate. These class of drugs are usually long-lasting, lipid-soluble, having large volume of distribution, lower renal clearance rate, undergoing hepatic metabolism. Side effects include hypokalemia, hyponatremia, hypomagnesemia, hyperuricemia, fatigue, weakness, hypercholesterolemia, hypertriglyceridemia, hyperglycemia, which is secondary to insulin suppression, and stimulation of glycogenolysis. So these thiazide diuretics are usually preferred in elderly population and post-menopausal women with predisposed osteoporosis. They are also used in hypertensive patients with mild fluid retention. Next, we have loop diuretics, which acts upon the proximal convoluted tubule and ascending loop of Henle, blocking the reabsorption of sodium, potassium and chloride ions. Loop diuretics are rapidly absorbed orally with 60% bioavailability, low lipid solubility and highly bound to plasma proteins. T-half is 1 to 2 hours and these drugs excrete unchanged through glomerular filtration. Side effects include hypokalemia, hyponatremia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, orthostatic hypotension, dehydration and metabolic alkalosis. So loop diuretics usually maintain the effectiveness in the presence of impaired renal function even at high doses. These drugs help in reducing the fluid buildup in the lungs and swelling in feet and ankles. Aldosterone antagonist, which mainly includes spironolactone and eplerenone. So these drugs mainly blocks the aldosterone, inhibiting the production of sodium potassium ATPase or sodium potassium pump, inhibiting the sodium reabsorption and potassium excretion. So spironolactone and eplerenone is also indicated in the post myocardial infarction with left ventricular systolic dysfunction. Side effects include diarrhea, drowsiness, headache, impotence, mental confusion, gynecomastia, irregular menses, amenorrhea, hirsutism, deepening of the voice, hyponatremia and hyperkalemia. Coming to the interactions of diuretics, diuretics are known to have drug-to-drug interactions with NSAIDs, decreasing the effects of diuretics, carbamazepine, which increases the risk of hyponatremia, lithium, where the excretion of lithium is being impaired. Coming to the drug disease interactions, diuretics interact with the prostates, causing urinary retention, hyperuricemia, causing exacerbation of gout, and liver cirrhosis, producing encephalopathy. Coming to the next class of drugs, we have ACE inhibitors, where captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, quinapril, ramipril, fosinopril, trandolapril, perindopril comes under ACE inhibitors. Next we have angiotensin receptor blockers, where candicertan, valsartan and losartan belongs to ARBs. Next we have beta blockers, which includes bisoprolol, carvedilol, carvedilol phosphate and metoprolol succinate. Talking about the angiotensin convertase enzyme inhibitors, these drugs prevent the conversion of angiotensin 1 to 2, thereby preventing the peripheral vasoconstriction, where the systolic blood pressure drops and there would be improvement in the cardiac function. These drugs also help in reducing both the preload and afterload, thereby increasing the cardiac output. These drugs also can be used for preventing the undesirable activation of renin-angiotensin system, which are caused by diuretics. Pharmacokinetics, captopril, it penetrates through brain. Absorption is affected by the presence of food. T-half is 2 hours. Enalapril, absorption is not affected by food. Longer duration of action. ACE inhibitors are also indicated in moderate and severe heart failure with reduced left ventricular ejection fraction, asymptomatic heart failure preceded by myocardial infarction. These drugs are contraindicated in bilateral renal artery stenosis in case of pregnant women, previous cases of angioedema, increased creatinine and potassium levels. Side effect includes hypotension, hyperkalemia, renal dysfunction, GI distress, dizziness, skin rashes, dry cough, taste disturbances and hypotension. Coming to the drug disease interactions, these drugs interacts with the renal artery stenosis causing renal failure, severe aortic stenosis causing exacerbation of heart failure, renal impairment causing renal failure, and in case of hypotension causing further exacerbation of hypotension and cardiogenic shock. So these drugs also improves the clinical status and reducing the risk of death and hospitalization in severe heart failure patients. It also reduces the strain on heart by reducing the risk of heart attacks. Angiotensin receptor antagonist or angiotensin 2 receptor antagonist or blockers. So these drugs block the angiotensin 2 receptors, inhibiting the sympathetic activity, thereby inhibiting the vasoconstrictor effects, resulting in vasodilation. So these drugs also prevent aldosterone release, decreasing the salt and water retention. Absorption is not usually affected by food. 30% bioavailable, undergoes first pass metabolism with a T-half of 2 hours. Side effects include headache, dizziness, hypotension, hyperkalemia and angioedema. ARBs are known to cause few drug-to-drug interactions, mainly with NSAIDs, causing antagonism of hypotensive effects, lithium causing impairment of lithium excretion, cyclosporin, there would be increased risk of hypokalemia, and diuretics, mainly potassium sparing, enhancing the hypotension, increasing the risk of hypokalemia. So these ARBs are mainly selected or used in ACE inhibitors intolerant patients experiencing cough, renal insufficiency and hyperkalemia. Coming to the next class of drugs, it's beta blockers. Beta blockers usually counterattack deleterious effects of enhanced sympathetic stimulation, reducing the risk of arrhythmias and sudden death. It also combats sympathetic neurohormonal overactivity, minimizing the abnormal cardiac muscle changes due to overactivity. Beta blockers are indicated in decompensated heart failure, bronchospasm and advanced heart block. Side effects include bradycardia, GI upset, impotence, negative chronotropic effect, withdrawal symptoms, increase airway resistance, exacerbation of peripheral artery disease, facilitation of hypoglycemia and hyperkalemia. So these beta blockers are usually recommended to all patients irrespective of the severity. Beta blockers usually should be initiated at very low doses and has to be titrated upward gradually. So these drugs can be also used in combination with diuretics and ACE inhibitors. So the benefits of using beta blockers are: it increases the left ventricular ejection fraction, have little effect on exercise tolerance, decrease mortality and hospitalization. Beta blockers also shouldn't be withdrawn immediately, as there might be experience of initial exacerbation of heart failure because of transient worsening of cardiac output. Nitroprusides, these drugs catalyze the conversion to nitric oxide by glutathione in the vascular smooth muscle, causing vasodilator action. This drug also decreases the venous return, thereby reducing the total peripheral resistance and cardiac output. Nitroprusides are metabolized in liver to thiocyanate and are excreted slowly. Side effects: vomiting, weakness, abdominal pain and nervousness. Next we have nitrates, which are usually given in combination with hydralazine. The most common among the nitrates are isosorbate dinitrate 20 mg. So these drugs act upon the cyclic GMP, mainly increasing the intracellular concentration of cGMP. Thereby there would be direct arterial smooth muscle relaxation, reducing the total peripheral resistance, resulting in the increased stroke volume and cardiac output. So these drugs are well absorbed orally, undergoing first pass HEP metabolism. T-half is 1 to 2 hours. Side effect includes headache, fullness in head, fluid retention, flushing, palpitation and lupus-like reactions. Nitrates usually interact with the sildenafil, producing increased hypotensive effect, and also heparin, causing increased excretion of it. Cardiac glycosides or positive inotropic agents. Under this we have the most widely used drug, digoxin, with a dose of 0.125 to 0.25 mg once daily. Digoxin usually acts by inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase pump, increasing the intracellular sodium and calcium influx, thereby increasing the contractility of heart muscles. Digoxin is contraindicated in ventricular fibrillation, acute myocardial infarction, renal impairment and hypothyroidism. Signs and symptoms of digoxin toxicity: mainly the extracardiac or non-cardiac symptoms mainly include anorexia, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, visual disturbances, photophobia, reduced color perception, dizziness, neuralgia, delirium and psychosis. The cardiac symptoms of digitoxin toxicity include atrial and ventricular arrhythmia, premature ventricular depolarization, ventricular fibrillation, atrial ventricular block, junctional and paroxysmal atrial tachycardia and sinus bradycardia. Monitoring parameters of digoxin includes periodic ECG assessment, serum levels of potassium, magnesium, calcium and creatinine, non-cardiac signs and serum digoxin concentration. So the dose of digoxin has to be altered or adjusted in case of hepatic impairment based on the eGFR and creatine clearance levels. Digoxin is known to interact with certain drugs, mainly amiodarone, propafenone, quinidine, causing increased digoxin levels in the body. Interacts with the verapamil, increasing the risk of AV block, and amphotericin, causing increase in the cardiac toxicity with hypokalemia. So the digoxin also interacts with some of the disease conditions, mainly bradyarrhythmia, causing exacerbation of heart failure, renal impairment, causing exacerbation of heart failure, and digoxin toxicity, leading to cardiac arrhythmia. Other medications which are used in the management of congestive heart failure are phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitors. So under PDE3 inhibitors, we have milrinone and enoximone. So these drugs selectively inhibit CAMP and phosphodiesterase activity. These drugs are also used in the severe heart failure as an adjunctive therapy associated with arrhythmias, increased mortality rate and hospitalization. Coming to the next class of drugs, it's sacubitril or valsartan, basically neprilysin inhibitors. So these drugs inhibit the neprilysin, promoting the vasodilation. Also, this drug is being used in combination for the indication of reduction in the risk of cardiovascular death and hospitalization. Coming to the last drug or the novel heart failure drug, we have ivabradine 7.5 mg. So this drug blocks the HCN channel, reducing the worsening of heart failure. It is indicated for the symptomatic chronic heart failure with reduced left ventricular ejection fraction and sinus rhythm with tachycardia. Coming to the surgical procedures and other techniques, there are implantable cardiac deep defibrillators, cardiac resynchronization therapies, coronary artery bypass surgery, PCIs, which are nothing but percutaneous coronary intervention, heart transplantation, and ventricular assistable devices. Non-pharmacological therapy mainly includes educating about the nature of disease, role of medications in the treatment, and certain self-help strategies. Diet mainly involves avoiding intake of large amount of meals, weight reduction through physical activities and dietary modifications, sodium restriction as sodium may precipitate or exacerbate heart failure conditions, fluid restrictions with an intake of 1.5 to 2 liters per day. Maintaining the desired BMI levels as obesity is known to be one of the risk factors of developing heart failure. Avoiding smoking and limiting alcohol habits. Performing regular moderate aerobic exercise in case of mild to moderate condition, and complete rest in case of severe heart failure cases. Vaccination such as influenza vaccination and pneumococcal vaccination are known to have protective role in patients with heart failure. By this slide, I am going to end my presentation. Thank you.